I call to order the September 2024 meeting of the Governance and Policy Committee. You're both? Yep. Oh, all right, thank you. I'll start over. I call to order the September 2024 meeting of the Governance and Policy Committee of the University of Minnesota Board of Regents. Good morning, everyone. Thank you to those who are joining us via the live stream video and those attending in our boardroom here in the Twin Cities campus. I will note that Chair Verhalen is joining us remotely this morning. Good morning, Chair Verhalen. I hope I can do well in your shoes here. All right, our first item today is the 2024-25 committee work plan. Chair Verhalen and I worked with Executive Director Steves and his team to design the plan. Executive Director Steves, can you walk us through the work plan?
Madam Vice Chair and members of the committee, the work plan, which you've seen in the docket, really has several arcs in it, and those arcs address the comprehensive review of the code of conduct that applies to members of the Board of Regents, also a comprehensive review of the board's bylaws, which is a big undertaking. Just so that you know that it's one of the foundational documents of the board, and so that will take some time this year. We have some committee housekeeping built in. We'll talk a little bit about that today. We'll talk about that in coming meetings as well. And then in the spring, we will begin to take up and review kind of an off-cycle review, but we'll look at the policy on namings and renamings, in part because this committee did a number of significant changes to that policy a few years ago, and it's now been in place for a few years, and it's probably time for us to take a look at how it's working or not working and maybe make some adjustments based on experience. And so that's in a nutshell what you're seeing in the work plan, but we're happy to answer any questions.
All right, any questions regarding the contents of the work plan? All right, hearing none then.
Sorry.
Oh, yes, I didn't see. I'm sorry, Chair Verhalen.
That's okay. I just wanted to express kind of a conversation that we've had several times, which is we will obviously be nimble as different issues come to us, and there may be other issues that we have to add to the work plan as we go along. So don't be surprised if we bring you all something new as things arise this year.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, then the second item of business is to summarize feedback from the board regarding how it receives input from the public and to discuss potential options for going forward. Associate Secretary Jason Langworthy and Assistant Executive Director Marlo Washon are here to summarize the board's feedback. So first, Executive Director Steves, would you like to start us off?
Madam Vice Chair and members of the committee, this last year, as this committee well knows, we launched a significant new tool in the public input space, and that's the board's virtual forum. We've been quite pleased with how that's worked. We have some bugs and things that we have on our wish list to work out with it, but we think it's really been a good opportunity and option for individuals to provide the board with feedback wherever they are, whenever they want to, in written, video, audio format, however they would like to do it. And so that's been an exciting development. And today we will be talking through and announcing a new and exciting set of listening opportunities that the board will be engaged in. And this is really the result of feedback from this committee as well as the rest of the board. And so we'll talk through that today, how it fits into this landscape of public input that the board receives. And finally, we'll just talk a little bit about potential bylaws changes that some have flagged for this committee to consider. And so with that, I'll let the team take it away.
Thank you, Vice Chair Mayron, members of the committee. As a quick reminder, Regents receive input on many issues before the board and in many different ways. Several are regular and structured. For instance, the virtual forum. You're also familiar with the annual budget forum we do as the budget is coming up for review and vote. The student reps, of course, that program provides an opportunity for those students to provide perspective both in meetings as they sit on these different committees, but also through their annual report. You also have regular reports and opportunities to meet with shared governance leaders and many of the campus visits and events that the board is invited to attend. Additionally, the board as a whole and often Regents individually receive direct input via email, voicemail, and when they're out in the community. Today's conversation will continue those discussions about public input and that the board has had over the last few years and over this summer, and Associate Secretary Langworthy will now address one element of that discussion.
Vice Chair Mayron, members of the committee, good morning. You may recall back in December of 2023 during new business, Regent Farnsworth moved the motion that's displayed on the screen before you. And while and the resulting way that the board acted on that was to refer it to the Governance and Policy Committee for its consideration after conclusion of the virtual forum pilot project. And now, while this topic was also discussed at the retreat, we just wanted to formally mark and have it sort of appear here in the docket so that you are reminded of it. It can be part of the discussion today, though it's been part of those retreat discussions to formally do what the board instructed the committee to do, which was to consider it after the virtual pilot project was completed. And I'll turn it back over to Assistant Executive Director Welshons.
Thank you. So the takeaways from these prior conversations in this committee, board's discussion, and other venues, including the retreat, broadly speaking, you would like to continue the virtual forum. We are working, as Executive Director Steves noted, to improve both some back end under the hood issues that we're experiencing, as well as some of the user experiences that we're seeing, specifically ensure the mobile compatibility and some accessibility. The board would also like to ensure that engagement activities are truly engaging, that they're planned in a way that Regents have opportunities to talk with and learn from participants. And the board would like to pilot a program of structured listening activities across all campuses over this next year. So the idea for these is that instead of tying public comment opportunities to board meetings on the Twin Cities campus, Regents can meet the university community where they are, literally and figuratively, instead of making those individuals come to McNamara. So in other words, engagement outside of regularly scheduled meetings is an important priority for this board. So this graphic visualizes how such engagement will be structured, both year by year and over the course of a 6-year Regent term. You'll see many of the regular activities here along the top in that gold box that you are very familiar with, and then coupled with odd and even year strategies that pairs up to the election cycle every other year. So in odd years or Regent election years, our focus will be on campus visits and tours, and although there is an onboarding focus to these visits, the newly elected Regents aren't the sole audience. And it's been our practice to extend these onboarding campus visits to all Regents who may be available, and we will continue that practice. In even years, we plan to continue visiting campuses and go around the state, but the goal is to dive deeper and to focus on research and outreach sites, individual colleges on the Twin Cities campus, other areas that may be in alignment with board priorities. So these listening activities, how we are planning these for this year, thinking about it as a pilot, so we make sure we're learning. This coming year, we will pilot a month, at least once a month, listening activities across the system. The presidential search last year showed us the value of having a physical presence on each campus. So we're working out a schedule that provides Regents with the opportunity to participate in one or more of these, starting next month, and then continuing through spring semester. As these are planned, we're going to work closely with campus leadership, with shared governance, with student government, with others to promote them. But then also, as we hold them, we'll seek input from those groups as well as the Regents who participate to ensure that they are structured in a way that they are useful to you and to the community. So if we need to adapt the format or make any changes, through the the spring semester, we can do that. Associate Secretary Langworthy will finish us up with bylaws.
Everyone's favorite topic, bylaws. So Article 6, Section E of the bylaws define how requests to appear before the board are to be made. And currently that process is that they are to be made to the board secretary in advance and that they are then ruled on by the board chair. And we heard during the discussion in July that there appeared to be consensus that this process should be adjusted. And so we would appreciate your feedback on what adjustments you would like to be made. We've offered some potential options there. You could expand consideration of the request from just the board chair to board leadership, so the board chair and vice chair. You could have the board formally vote on each request, right? So the board secretary would receive the request, that would go on the agenda. You then would either grant the request or not, and then the requester would have an opportunity to appear at the following board meeting. Or you could eliminate the request process within the bylaws and direct individuals who do make requests through the Office of the Board of Regents to use other vehicles like shared governance, our virtual forum, or the listening activities that were just outlined. And so with that, Vice Chair Mayron, members of the committee, we're happy to answer questions, but would really appreciate your feedback as we think through how to continue to expand the engagement opportunities that you have available to you to receive public input.
Thank you. Maybe what we could do then in order to give guidance to the team members here and where we go next, and then ultimately in terms of any recommendations we want to make to the full board, is walk through each of these areas and get feedback from them as opposed to just jumping all over. So I think the best place to start is to confirm at least what we thought we heard at the retreat, that was that in lieu of doing creating basically a public mic at the board meetings here in McNamara, that in lieu of that we would go out around the system and very intentionally attend certain engagement activities where we could actually meet people where they are and hear from them what is on their mind. And that's summarized in the slide of what we heard. So want to first get people's reaction. Are we still on board with that? Is there something different you would like to do in terms of making sure that we are providing appropriate avenues for the university community to communicate to us? So any reactions on what we heard and what we think of what's the engagement activities that have been identified? Regent Turner.
Thank you, Chair Mayron. So, I mean, the reality is that the virtual forum, from what I remember of the statistics on it, we didn't have a whole lot of students that were actually using that. It was mainly the outside public. And so that led those of us who are, you know, we're originally wanting to have an open for, you know, ability here at the board meeting to kind of say, or at least I do, we need to have a way to meet the students. So these engagement activities, and I wasn't coherent during a lot of the discussion via Zoom with my 102 fever. So, but anything that we can do to actually see the students, and I would say, you know, when we did the onboarding, you met a lot of the wonderful people, but you met all the leaders of the campus. And so hopefully, for what I'm hearing from Marlo, it would be organized, that it would be really publicized to get those different student groups, et cetera, because that's going to be my main objective when I go to the campuses, is to be able to actually talk to the students.
All right. Other feedback about engagement activities in lieu, whether it's in lieu of the public forum here or any combination, but trying to get feedback. Are we moving in the right direction? Chair Verhalen.
Thank you, Vice Chair Mayron. I'm really excited about these opportunities to engage in sessions on the different campuses. Not only will that give us an opportunity to get out to the different locations across the state, but also provide opportunities for those who live a long ways from McNamara to have an opportunity to interact with us, be able to travel to those campuses without having to come all the way to McNamara. Those who can't travel to those can still interact with us in the virtual forum. I think it's going to be really important that we continue to think through these as we go along. To Regent Turner's point, we want to be thinking about how we're advertising these or publicizing these, how we're getting our student government at each of the campuses aware of these, making sure it's far enough in advance and they're able to get the word out to students as well. But also to hear from other stakeholders at each of these locations, whether it be through the virtual forum or in person. There are a lot of people around the world who have connections to the university and want to have a way to communicate with us. And we've started to see some of that through the virtual forum, which has been encouraging. This is another great opportunity. And I think as we think through what the next steps might be, I at least see these as a much more meaningful opportunity to engage with us than just coming and sitting in front of the board and speaking for a couple minutes and walking away. Because the presentations to the board don't give us a lot of opportunity to engage. We wouldn't have a lot of time to do it. And we've already seen where we have granted the opportunity to come and address us, there isn't a lot of back and forth or dialogue, which I'm hoping to see more of in these engagement sessions.
Thank you. Other reactions? Regent Hipsch.
Thanks, Chair. So I really believe it's important to go into the communities that we serve. I've been to
Your microphone.
yeah, sorry. I've been to Rochester, Morris, and Crookston to events, and so one of the things that we don't get when the people come here is we don't get to see the community, talk to the community leaders, understand how important Morris is to the Chamber of Commerce, the business leaders, the farmers, or Crookston, or Rochester, and to go into there and see that, I think is really important. And especially some of our research stations that we never get to. So I think those are really important to go to too and see what they're doing and try to understand them better. So I'm all for this, and I'll try to get to as many as I can get to. I know I won't be able to go to all the engagements, but when I'm available, I should certainly go. So.
Let me just see if Regent Turner.
I just had a quick question in regards to that. I agree with you. I agree with Regent Hipsch that we should be meeting with other. So when we make these engagements, would they be long enough that we could organize the student part of it and then organize the going to see the business people and hobnobbing around the town?
I think we can make it be whatever we want to be as long as we pre-plan it and let the board office know what it is that we are interested in focusing on when we go to a particular community. And so it seems to me contact and communication and dialogue with students very important, and creating those meaningful opportunities so there can be going back and forth between the regents attending and the students. Also hearing for opportunities for the wider community, whether it's faculty, staff, surrounding community, also to have access to us. And if both are important, then it seems to me it's talking with the board office about making that happen. But I don't think it has to be either or.
Right, and follow up, a good way to do it is to go through their city council. Then you've got the, representation, but they can help organize that kind of thing.
You can help organize this, right? Right, team?
Madam Chair.
Yeah, Regent Wheeler.
Yeah, and I really appreciate these changes. And, it was, from my perspective, I thought that feedback at the board meetings, I've seen that work in another setting. I thought it was completely unsatisfying in this thing. It was geographically limiting for some people to get here. It was time boxed in a significant way. It didn't allow for any kind of follow-up questions by us. So to be able to go to people and see them in their own community, that makes a whole lot of sense to me. I guess my question would be, how do we then bring the feedback that we hear back to the board and back to leadership in an effective way. So that would be the follow-up.
And I had a similar comment on this, that not all regions will be attending any of these engagement activities. We're going to spread out, it'll be spread out among us, but getting feedback from those regions who attended as to what they heard and what they saw, I think also has to be part of our responsibilities. Otherwise, only those 2, 3, 5, whatever it is, have had the benefit of the dialogue, and the rest of us are clueless as to what was said. And so I think there has to be a way to provide us, whether it's something that we can dictate or, fill out right away as to what we heard or the key issues, or to work with the board office so we can make sure that we are communicating to our fellow colleagues what we heard. I think that's really important. I was going to say, I, for one, like Regent Turner, find it very important to get the student feedback, because that's when we talked about the resolution of the open mic. By and large, the people who do come here are, I think my perception is, they're students. And what we're talking about is how we can interact with them in a more meaningful way. So I would be delighted whenever we're having these opportunities that, number one, there be a time set aside for, whether it's in an auditorium or wherever, where students can come in and talk to all of the regents together and share as if it were an open mic, but share their thoughts and allow us time for dialogue. And separate from that, I love the idea of the pop-up table where we're available and sitting at the table, and whoever is walking past us, they weren't able to attend that meeting and they have something they want to share, they could do both. So to me, those would be two vehicles to get at student input. And this could be done, as not necessarily a formal pilot, but try it and let's see how it works and how effective we think we're getting those communications from students in that dialogue. Yes, Regent Johnson.
Just with regard to the student experience and that you just mentioned, it comes to mind, we're also starting as a new thing, a special committee on student experience, and chaired by Michael Kenyanya, and I and several of us are on there, 6 of us from the board are on that. And I'm wondering if there's some way that, if we're going out to site visits, we can work together, those two, to get that, and then come back, as part of the, been out of the mission fulfillment committee, but maybe we can collaboratively work on that, and then have them bring back a specific report about student experience.
All right. Anything else anybody wishes to share on this particular topic? All right. Yes.
Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, I'll just say we've been, capturing this feedback, and thank you. We, as we launch these, they will not be all things to everyone. I say that in part because there are 12 different opinions and visions for exactly what this might be. What we will be doing to start with is we will be targeting high traffic locations, having regents at a tabling type event. We will be then, in conjunction with that, doing where we can, and it won't look the same on every campus, we will be doing some other kinds of activities. That may be not having a regent in an auditorium where we expect people to come there, but it may be we're going to have a group of students lead you through a greenhouse, and they're going to talk to you about what their research is, or a faculty member, or they're going to take you through a facility that needs HEAPR dollars, or so there'll be other ways that we should think about how we engage in this. And so if you can stay flexible and nimble in your thinking, we'll be able to keep trying to experiment with things and find things that work well and meet everyone's needs, and they won't all look the same. So hopefully we can hit the right sweet spot as we experiment with these over time. But some of them will work and some of them won't, and so we ask you to bear with us as we try to experiment a little bit with it.
I also think it's important for each of the campuses, Twin City and all of our other campuses, to work with us to market this, that we're going to be there, and perhaps makes, suggested questions. Do you have, here are examples of things that may be on your mind. You have an opportunity to talk to the regents. the information we're going to get in sometimes will only be as good as the questions we ask. And so we need to market it to that so that we're not going there and nobody shows up. So we need to make sure the word is getting out that they're coming, and we're going to need the help from each of the campuses to make sure they're getting the word out to their community, and in particular, the students. Yep.
Can I just make one more comment?
Yes. Regent Hitch, sorry.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to also keep track of it so that we, at the end of the year, we say we made 100 visits and at these areas, and so we make sure that we're getting all over the place. So we need to be able to measure what we do, and I think that that's an important.
Good.
And so we can say, yeah, we tried to be as fair as we could, so.
Regent Wheeler?
Yeah, I was just going to say, and to the extent that the questions that we ask, if that can be part of hearing voices on the strategic planning exercise, that would be great from President Cunningham, your perspective in your office to see what could we be extension arms of some of those queries with the students and others. Yeah.
We're getting a nod of approval and a thumbs up by our president. All right, Regent Turner?
I was just going to point out one other advantage. The more we get out there, and especially to all of the greater Minnesota campuses, the more when we come back to the legislature, the more we've seen and heard from those communities, that is going to be huge when you're talking, and we're talking all the legislators in the area. You know what I mean? You go to Morris campus and then you can hit up all the legislators. I used to do this when I made sure I went to all the hospitals in whatever area. And so then when I met that legislator, I was able to talk to them, first of all, have you been to your local hospital? That kind of thing. But it gave me a connection with them. And so the more that we are able to say, look, we've seen, not that it helped this year, but the more we can say, we've seen the boiler system in Crookston. We've seen the multi-purpose building on Morris that it doesn't have elevator. You see what I'm saying? And that we can directly take that up to the Capitol.
Well, building on that, it also seems you had said contact the council members. Maybe it means if it works into the schedule, setting aside some time for legislators in the area and where that school is located to come and visit with us too about what's on their mind or what questions do they enter. And so offer that up as well. All right, let's go on to the next one, which is request to appear before the board. We all know what the issue is. It's come up several times. The board office has laid out potential options on how to address this. One is to keep it as it is. Also, that's another option. And then there are alternative options as well. Thoughts on this one? Yes, Regent Hitch.
I have a thought and a question. Well, since I've been vice chair, you've brought stuff to the executive committee, and you've asked our opinions on stuff, right? So, we kind of do it by committee already. So that's the first thing. But what is the process if the chair says no? And is there a certain number of regents that can override the chair, or is that it? Or do they bring it up in new business, or is there what does Robert say about that?
Before you answer that question, let me just, I did want to say one thing, and this is building on what Regent Hitch said. When we talk about expand approval from board chair to board leadership, it is true that the approval or denial comes from me, but I have consulted with the vice chairs about this to reach a decision on it. Now, it may be that it isn't unanimous, but my memory is on these issues that we've dealt with, it has been unanimous on both the issues with respect to the request for the VEST group to appear before us and the request for the gymnast to appear before us as well. I consulted. So that's already happening. It's not codified, but I do consult with, and to be frank, it's a tripart decision. And then, there is no process, but go ahead, you give it to us, Robert.
But Vice Chair Mayron, Regent Hipsch, there is no process. But the two avenues, one would be to bring up the request if the other regions knew about it in new business, right? And to vote to direct the board chair to grant time. The other one would be to suspend the bylaws. Because that's what we're talking about. We're not talking about policy, we're talking about bylaws. So suspending the bylaws and then the board granting the request in that moment. To suspend the bylaws, that takes a supermajority.
So a supermajority is 60%, or what is?
2/3.
2/3, okay.
And let me just
Won't
say,
take 2/3 to suspend the bylaws or add to new business, or is new business, is that?
yeah.
That's a simple majority?
So new business, it would come as a main motion. It would be voted on within that setting. You would need just a simple majority since it's a main motion. If you wanted to amend the agenda in the moment, since it's already set, that would take a 2/3 in the moment. And so the main motion in new business would likely be to direct it for the next meeting.
So there isn't a process, but there kind of is a process.
It gets very convoluted very quickly, Regent Hipsch.
Okay, yeah.
and let me just say, along that line, to the extent we have gotten the request, they are time sensitive. So the problem is that at least in the last two situations, the request came in to appear at the very next board meeting. And so if we want to vote at the next board meeting, it means putting off whatever we decided till the following board meeting, which may be that month, or it may not be for 2 months before that group can, or individual can come and appear before us. So I think as a practical matter, we're talking about, we need to explore options if in fact we want someone to weigh in on this, that whether it's the board or whomever, they need to be able to do it prior to the upcoming board meeting, not at the board meeting itself. Because these people they're told they're getting a limited amount of time. If they have materials they want to submit, they should submit them to us in time. That won't happen if we're voting at one board meeting and we say yes. It's going to make it very difficult for them to appear and be effective right in the moment. So, other thoughts about this?
Regent Verheugen.
Oh, for Regent Verheugen, I didn't know who you were pointing to. Okay, there's the hand. Thank you, Regent Verheugen.
That's great. Thank you, Vice Chair Miron. One thought is to give the listening activities that we have going on an opportunity, and it may eliminate the need for even the request process, because of the other opportunities that are being provided for purposes of interactions. There's always the opportunity for the board chair to create the agenda however they will. But by having a bylaw that allows for a request process, it tees up the question of who, why, for what reasons, does it have to be something on the agenda, et cetera, whereas the listening activities, the virtual forum, all of our shared governance allow so many other opportunities to engage at any given time versus the strict, and they're not super strict, but strict guidelines of board meetings and functions.
Okay. Other reactions?
I have one. So if we have the board formally vote on each request, then that's going to be, it's
We have
going
to
to
have a
put us
board
back in
meeting.
meeting anyway, right?
Yeah, I think,
I mean, that's.
I wanted to point out, if we're going to ask the board to formally vote on each request, and we want to do it in advance of the board meeting they want to appear at, we will have to have a special board meeting, I assume, in order to vote on that request. I will say, so I just throw that out there, it's cumbersome if we're going to have the entire board vote on a request. I also will say, when the requests come through, as you know, they come, you all get, it's to the regents, and the bylaws provide that the board chair makes the decision. You're all aware of it. Even when I have made ultimately the decision, I will say, if my colleagues don't like it, you let me know that, and then I have revisited that decision that I've made with my vice chairs. In other words, I'm not, to be frank, this is not a decision that I solely want to make. I want support from the board on this, or that I'm reading the tea leaves, and I think any of our future chairs will as well. So it's not like we don't hear when you don't like that, when we say, and a number of you will say, look, why don't you just let them appear? It's 5 minutes of our time, and just let them talk to us, and we'll move on, and just let them appear. And so those are considerations. Regent Turner.
Thank you, Chair Mayron, or what are you, Vice Chair today?
I don't know what I am today.
I really hesitate using the word eliminate. I hear what Regent Bernhalen is saying, but the reality is when various groups want to see they want to see the upper management. They want to see who's at the top of the pillar here, and they want to see the regents. And so, yeah, shared governance, virtual form, and all that. You have to understand what their goal is and what they feel is going to be their last ditch effort is to be able to communicate with us directly. That's what's on their minds.
Let me just share one thought I have. An alternative to this is to, number one, you could expand approval to board leadership and make that formal, as opposed to what I've done informally. But number two is we could develop criteria by which board leadership would entertain the request. And so when ultimately the decision was made to grant the request for the divestiture request versus the gymnastics request, I was looking at the totality of the circumstances, how that we had been communicated with, and to be frank, whether the appearance could make a difference in how we proceeded. For the Palestinian request, I could see that we were going to be struggling with their request and whatever they said to us at the meeting potentially could make a difference. For the gymnastics request, because we had done so much legwork and there were no alternatives for us to meet their need for physical space on campus, ultimately, for me, the decision was we've given them many avenues. They've met with people. They have sent us many, many written communications, videos, but at the end of the day, letting them come here just so they have the opportunity to be heard, when we could not offer an alternative, where there was no option, seemed unfair to them and didn't seem like a good use of our time. Now, that's kind of the criteria I used to make the decision of why the Palestinian group and why not the gymnastics group. But we could create as part of this criteria that board leadership or the board chair would use to entertain such a request and see if we can come to agreement on that. If it was just to let people be heard, I'd probably disagree with you. If it will make a difference, I'd probably agree with you on it, that we should grant that request. And so, but that's just me speaking.
Well, I respect your opinion.
Okay. Regent Hipp.
So I think what we're doing now is very practical and it works. And I don't think we should change it. And I mean, if you're going to have the board leadership vote on it, are we going to always have two vice chairs? And, so because if it's 50-50, vice chair votes, how you decide that. And secondly, so I could see us having a whole big part of the meeting deciding on what we're going to talk about at the next meeting, because people turn in requests and we sit here and you debate whether we should talk about this at the next meeting or not. And we could fill up our whole next meeting with request to speak before the board. So I think the system hasn't been broke. It's been going like this for how long? Forever. And I think we should stay with it. So
With the current system of having the board chair and his or her sole discretion make the decision.
Yeah.
What if you added language in consultation with vice chair?
Yeah, in consultation, but it's still, I mean, it's what we're doing.
happening.
It's what we're doing now. So
Or with in consultation with board leadership.
Yeah, whoever the board leadership is. One of the things we'll get to when we talk about the bylaws is perhaps codifying that board leadership could be a chair and one or more vice chairs, so as to codify what we've in fact done this time by suspending the bylaws on this. Regent Turner.
Is that what we would put in this? Is that what we're thinking of doing then? Because we're ultimately wanting to change this particular bylaw, right? And so you're thinking to add in consultation?
Yeah, I mean, that's a suggestion to add to the bylaw in consultation with board leadership. So, whether it's one vice chair or two vice chairs, or I don't think it'll be more than that. But
I fully support that, and here's the reason: is if it's written in the words, then it also gives a new regent coming on, and you're not nearly as scary as you used to be. And no, it gives you permission to, yes, it's the vice chairs, but it also gives the permission of, oh yeah, I can call her up and give my opinion about it. So I fully support putting in those words because it makes a difference.
And that way you could talk, excuse me, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
That way
go ahead.
You could talk to either of the vice chairs too, and then we can consult, so.
yeah, Regent Johnson, then Regent Wheeler.
I would just agree with that as well, and I just think it's good for everybody to know that it's not just one person. That means we're looking at, and I think that's good for everybody who's applying to or looking at this.
I like that also a lot, Vice Chair Mayron, about in consultation with board leadership, using the criteria that you said, so helps to make that more definitive. My query would be, I imagine you're in consultation with the university president as well, because, sometimes things may have been addressed, and to address them here may be in conflict, or we should know about that anyway. So I'm wondering if that's a reasonable add as well, because I think that's how the practice has gone in addition.
We do, because it's the administration who is, on the front line dealing with all of the issues substantively. So we are in constant communication we were and we will be on those issues.
Right, and in consultation doesn't mean that the ultimate decision isn't made by a board, but I think that consultation is required. Yeah.
Because I would agree with that too, and so maybe we just want to say in consultation with board and university leadership, or whatever, whatever is the right wording for that. That would respond.
Well, I want to gain input, ultimately this is a request to the board to allow them to appear at our board meeting, but certainly gaining input from the administration on the topic at hand will be done anyway, but if we feel a need to codify it in a bylaw, that certainly wouldn't be appropriate. Let me just ask, are you suggesting as part of the bylaw that we also, that whether it's in the bylaw or not, that this committee develop some criteria by which the chair and board leadership would consider requests?
I liked your idea about that criteria. It seems to have been helpful when you've made these discernments in the past. I don't know that it has to be codified in the bylaws or not, but I like that. Yeah.
All right. Yes, I'm seeing President Cunningham. Yes, input from other experiences.
Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair Myron.
For a day.
For a day. In practice, Regent Wheeler, my office in the administration has information about typically if there's issues that are arising to the level of the board. Our office has been deeply engaged all across the constituents. And so while the decision on who the board entertains here in this room is up to the board and board leadership, we certainly provide the information on what's going on in the past. The idea of criteria might help set community expectations on when they may expect or not expect to receive an audience, but how that works is up to you folks.
All right, I think we've got some good guidance on where to go with this. The last issue is on our very robust discussion about the bylaws. Most of what you're going to be proposing are cleaning up things and tweaking them. But I did want to get people's sense about changing the bylaw that right now talks about the election of a chair and vice chair. And I'd like to suggest a bylaw change that says the election of a chair and one or more vice chairs, so that we don't have to go through what we went through on the fly when we started to see how the vote was and suspend the bylaws so that we could have a second vice chair. Yes.
And Vice Chair Mayron, we'll have more time at the October meeting to talk about that. We'll have a broad overview of the board's bylaws, and then we'll be able to discuss
Take
it at
that
that
up.
point.
Okay, all right, so we can take your temperature about that thought at the October meeting. How am I doing here? Are we supposed to?
We're ready for the next item when you are. We're about
that?
5 minutes behind.
Oh, okay, all right, we're ready. Then bring it home and we're going
Say
on.
more, that could mean 8 chairs, so you have to be careful with the words.
We could say,
more.
yeah,
You know what I'm saying?
yeah, there are clearly issues if we had 8 vice chairs. I can't tell you the number of issues you'll have.
What did I
She said we're having a lot of issues with the vice chairs, and I'm sitting there.
No, just having 8 vice chairs, yep.
I'm just kidding.
All right, well, we'll take it up in October then. Good point. All right, let's move on to then our third item, which is committee structure adjustments. And let's see, then Executive Director Steves and Associate Secretary Langworthy will present this item. Executive Director Steves, would you like to start us on the topic?
Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee, as noted earlier, we believe there are some housekeeping items. We've entered an era when committee structure is more dynamic and nimble than we've probably had in a very long time. And so with creation of special committees and elimination of special committees and modifications to committee portfolios and potentially name changes and other things, we think that it's a good time to make some housekeeping cleanup adjustments to the board's committee structure. And so today we begin that conversation so that we can gather input and bring back to you some changes that you can consider for recommendation to the board. With that, I'll walk through.
Vice Chair Mayron, members of the committee, just a quick reminder of your current standing and special committees. And the additions for this year, the 2 new special committees, one on student affairs and one on university workforce. So at the retreat, we wanted to summarize again what we heard, much like we did with the last item. So we heard that you would like to retain the Finance and Operations and the Mission Fulfillment Committee as committees of all 12 regions or committees of the whole. There was maybe some question of retitling Mission Fulfillment to a more descriptive title. Would welcome any thoughts on that. Retain Audit and Compliance, Governance and Policy, and Litigation Review as committees of 6 regions each. So those are the other 3 main standing committees that you have currently. And to codify that litigation review would meet off cycle of the regular board meeting, so not in conjunction of your normal sort of Thursday, Friday meetings. It seemed that there is a desire and likely a need to elevate the Special Committee on Academic Health to a standing committee of 6 regents. Elevating it to a standing committee means that it will remain in perpetuity until the board were to change the number of standing committees, right? Special committees are formed under the authority of the chair and remain for as long as the chair sort of keeps the special committees going. And so given the consequential nature of that work, and the focus of the board, elevating that to a standing committee of 6 regions to build that knowledge within the board seemed like something that we heard that the board is interested in doing. Continue to use special committees for timely topics and add board work sessions like the one yesterday for deeper dives into topics and allow for more informal conversations. It was one of the reasons why we had that discussion in the West Committee room, trying to create a little bit of a more informal environment, hopefully conducive for discussion. The open questions I think we have, so the 2 new special committees, and it might be a little bit too early to tell, but focused on human resources and workforce and then student affairs, should those become potentially new standing committees, would you want to sort of, after you build and have, this year to, sort of delve into those topics more deeply, do they roll back up into sort of the parent committees of finance and operations and mission fulfillment, or should they remain their own? Are there any other gaps in the committee charges that you're seeing? Certainly the two new special committees were the result of a sense that the Finance and Operations and Mission Fulfillment Committee didn't have enough time on their agendas to address those topics. But are there other gaps? Are there other changes? Or do you want to do something completely different and radical and just not have committees and just meet over your 2 days as the board in sort of a committee of the whole? Maybe the first 3 hours of Thursday you take up human resources topics. The next 3 you take up student affairs topics, et cetera, over that sequence. I'll note that all of this currently is built keeping, which is what another item that we also heard, keeping the board's current meeting schedule of a full day Thursday and a half day Friday. Anything that starts to sort of expand beyond this in terms of the number of committees, we would need to look at either decoupling from the regular meeting or expanding further into Friday. So that's just something to keep in mind. The current agenda that we have and the way that we're sort of going back and forth between work session and the two new special committees maintains the current day. Anything beyond that would likely need to expand the day. And so like the last item, we welcome your comments and feedback. And based on those comments and feedback, then any changes necessary to board policy would then come before you for review at a future meeting.
We'll open up for discussion. I'll just start it off, and I'm just going to walk through what we heard and also your questions, at least give you my reaction to it, because I've also had more time to look at it with Regent Verhalen. I would retain the Finance and Ops Committee and Mission Fulfillment as a standing committee of all 12 regions. I would not change the name of Mission Fulfillment, and to me, the name is less important than what we do in it, but I would keep that name. I would retain the Audit and Compliance, Governance and Policy Litigation Review as committees of 6 regions each. And I would elevate the Special Committee on Academic Health to a standing committee of 6 regions. I think this is this is a long-term commitment by us and very key to our success as a university, and I think it deserves a committee of its own and not the special committee status. I would continue to use special committees for timely topics of particular interest. I really liked our first work session. I think our next one's going to be equally fun and exciting in October. I think it's premature to move the human resources workforce topics permanently from finance and operations to a new standing committee. I think we should see how it goes and then look at it then. Obviously, we have a huge commitment to it, no question about it. But I'd like to see how it works. I think we should see how it works in the work of that committee and is it helpful or not. Similarly with the student affairs special committee, you didn't ask that really, but, well, you did. Should it be a new student standing committee? I think, again, let's see how it goes. Let's see the kind of work they do and whether that makes sense at some point to make it a standing committee. I don't think there's other gaps right now in the committee charges. So that's kind of my 2 cents. Other reactions to this? Regent Turner.
Chair Maran, I agree with you 100%.
Okay, thank you.
But
Moving on.
I have a question about, and because we're talking scheduling. Can someone explain to me why we don't have a meeting in April, which is right in the middle of the legislative session?
Okay.
And a very crucial time that things coming down the pike that's going on at the Capitol. That just seems really strange to me, that would be, strategically, it doesn't make any sense to me.
Okay, all right, and before we answer that, let me just say one of the things that we've talked about with board leadership in terms of schedule is if the concept of having 2 retreats of the Regents makes sense and one in the summer, should we think about a retreat in April and not March? Which means because of weather conditions, particularly if we're going to try to do retreats at different locations other than the Twin Cities, that the possibility that the weather will interfere with that kind of retreat, and then we're putting those campuses through the paces and then not able to show up, I think is an issue. And so along those lines, as we answer your question about having a meeting, one possibility would be to move the March meeting and return to having the retreat and do it in April. So maybe we could answer the question about the schedule.
So then we wouldn't have a March meeting?
That was when we were talking about it, about the retreat / board meeting. We were talking about moving it from March to April when hopefully the weather is more cooperative. Okay, Regent Cunningham, I'm sorry, President Cunningham.
She's been promoted.
No, thank you. Vice Chair Myron,
Yeah, for sure.
Chair Verhalen. Just a minor comment that disregard or take as you will. The name mission I find confusing, because one of the things we try to do from an administrative standpoint is have everyone be encouraged that they're all contributing to mission. Finance is mission, operations is mission. We're all working towards mission. It took me a little while coming in to understand what you were doing with that committee here, and I finally understood it's research, education, and student services, really. So not that important. We can call it whatever everyone wants to call, but for me, was a lot more clear when I understood that's what it was, because for me, all the committees are working on the mission of the university. So,
Yes, Regent Johnson.
Thanks. I think it's important to discuss this. I mean, I think the word mission comes out of the kind of the concept of the land grant mission. I think that's where the phraseology comes for that. And I think that's valuable. And as I kind of tried to say yesterday at our mission fulfillment, there, you know, what that's doing is kind of telling you why we're doing it and kind of what we're doing, and finances ops, how we're doing it. But that's certainly all part, it's a continuum. You know, we have to break it into parts so we have time to explore those, and people with more expertise or interest in different areas can do that and contribute. So there may be a way to, I agree that there is a sense that everything is about the mission, and we're just looking at different parts of it. The academic is sort of the land grant, which is really educating, opening doors of education to regular folks. You know, it was farmers and mechanics, I think, were the words that they used in that era, and we understand how that comes into this. So I mean, I think that it is good to take a look at this and say, because it is kind of confusing, I think.
minor.
Actually, and that's part of the reason I'm trying to make some explanations as well, and it's a good time to look at it.
Okay, how about reactions? In Regent Hipsha, you have a comment, but I want to make sure we touch on the other items other than the name of mission fulfillment, whether we should change that or not.
Well, I'm with you on everything. I agree that mission statement is mission committee is confusing for people, not us maybe, but I would like to see research and outreach committee, and then a student and education committee or something, so that are full standing committees, because I think we all want to be on both of those committees, because we want to, I mean, that's why we're on the Board of Regents, and to not be able to be part of the mission, it's why, you know, so I would like to see those as standing committees, I guess, for students.
I'm sorry, so let me make sure I understand. You're saying,
I'd like to split the committees into, or keep them together, it doesn't matter, but
I'd
I'd like to rename it. I'd like to rename them and have them as separate committees, actually, so we get out of, because yesterday we talked about research and outreach a lot, you know, like in the mission fulfillment, and I thought that was really important. So, and to Regent Turner's comment about the April meeting, I mean, we make our decisions on the legislature way earlier than that. And so, if anything, we shouldn't meet in April so we can go down to the legislature and talk to them. You know, so, I mean, I do think it's important that we're available to go down there, so.
Can you answer the question in terms of schedule, whether we do have the option to change the schedule? We could add another board meeting. I mean, right now, we're set up to have 8 board meetings a year in 4 months. 4 months we're off. What flexibility do we have if we wanted to exercise it?
Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee, the board has complete flexibility in adopting its meeting calendar and schedule. You adopt it each year at your June annual meeting. You adopt a regular meeting calendar for the coming year. That has changed over time. Many years ago, the board would meet monthly. But then for a variety of reasons, including sensitivity to the administrative burden associated with preparing for these meetings, boards and presidents have talked about whether monthly was right. And so they started to move to a less than monthly schedule. And maybe 12 or so years ago, the board was meeting 9 times a year. Then President Kaler asked the board whether it could please consider a slightly less, slightly fewer meetings. What the board did at that time was it went to 8 regular meetings, 2 of which would not have committees associated with it. So the July and March meetings then were selected as the meetings that didn't have committees associated with them. And so that actually reduces a lot of work associated with it. If it's just a board meeting, it's different than a board and a full slate of committees. And so that's been the model roughly since then, with a few variations here and there, but it's roughly been 8 meetings a year, 2 of which don't have regular standing committees associated with them. And so that is certainly something you can revisit. You can also revisit which months those meetings occur in, but there is a bit of a cadence to it. When you think about your review and action cycle, there's a reason that September, October happen, and December, February. You want to put meetings so that you can have review and then you can act on something, so that it's maybe not a long period of time. You maybe wouldn't want to take 3 months in a row off or something like that, because it stretches out review action a long period. But yes, the board can certainly revisit, and it meets.
Other thoughts, including President Cunningham, from your experience in terms, and maybe it's too soon to say how, ideally how much the administration would like to come back to the board and get board answers or guidance, and whether 8 meetings, regular meetings a year is sufficient, committees only meeting 6 times a year. The other is, which, that means finance and ops, for example, and mission fulfillment, its current name, are only meeting 6 of those 8. And it depends what action items or where you need guidance from the board. And maybe it's too early at this point.
Madam Vice Chair, I'd certainly be happy to consider it. To the point perhaps of prior administrations, the administration does spend a lot of time preparing for the board, and there also is the business of running the university in addition to bringing the items forth, although the board's input is incredibly valuable. So I continue to, we do have quite a lot of opportunities in the day and a half here to present, and if there's flexibility within those to add things as they come up, I think I would be happy to work with the administration to make sure that our presentations are tight and concise, but still offer the opportunity for input without adding additional time. And we're just starting that process a little bit of how we think about consolidating and trying to get you the right information so that you can give the right input and decision. And so before we added additional months or additional full meetings that take everybody's time, because we can also call special meetings if possible, perhaps we should really work on the administration, and I can work with my team on how we can get presentations either a little bit shorter or a little bit tighter, or work within the time we have better. If I may, to Regent Hipp's former comment, it was nice yesterday, and I wasn't part of the meetings all last year. I do think, regardless of what we call, and it's a minor thing, whatever we call mission, whatever we call it, but whatever that committee is, it does, and I believe should reflect the full breadth of the different components of our mission of education, research, outreach towards our public land grant component. And so in the work plans that were built this year, those are better reflected. Now we pulled out the student part a little bit for the separate committee and decide how people want to do that going forward. But I think within that allotment of time, which is the full board, the mission committee, we can make sure that everyone is seeing, all the parts of the mission that are important, and we could adjust or add more things in there. If helpful, I would worry if we split it out into 2 meetings, then we wouldn't actually have the full board's input on both. But unless you need more time, so I think we can, if we need more time on those topics, we could add more time. It was a full meeting yesterday. It was a great meeting yesterday on mission, with much congratulations to my team for all the work they did.
Yep. I mean, it seems to me, I would be of interest of exploring the board's appetite for adding one more meeting, and meeting 9 times a year as opposed to 8. It just seems like the operation of this enterprise is so big, and granted, we have that's why we end up having special meetings, but it's hard to schedule special meetings, as you all know, to find a common date. So I think entertaining possibly adding 1 more month. I also would throw out that maybe we need to, in the July meeting and whether it's March or April, when we're trying to do a retreat, I would suggest that we think about having committees meet during those times and not just limiting it to a board meeting. Again, because to be frank, the bulk of much of what we do is in finance and ops and in mission, and which allows us to take on different topics for the board, but it is the only opportunity when the entire board meets on those committee meetings. So just a thought about that. And I do recognize if you add another board meeting, more time is spent by the administration in preparing and our office as well. But maybe and I do understand if we have committee meetings during that time, that does create more work. Clearly it does for whatever is going to happen. But I just think there's so many big issues to run this enterprise. So various thoughts. Regent Wheeler.
Yeah, just a few, first of all, just a few asterisks to Chair Mara and your comments. I agree with you completely about what should happen. The asterisks come in a few ways. On academic health, I think that should be a standing committee, and that's going to be something that perpetuates. That said, we should be aware that given the negotiations going on, that the governance roles could change because of those negotiations, but as long as we have that awareness, I think it's going to be standing and in some form going forward. But the negotiations with Fairview may have a question about how do we set up the governance in the best possible way. So that would be one there. On the people part, I've long held that we are squeezing that in finance and operations. So I love that the work group is starting on the workforce, the committee on the workforce. Is it to steal a slogan from a previous organization? Students are the reason we exist and people are the reason we excel. So to not have, some dedicated time on the human resource part is difficult, but I think the workforce committee gives us that time, and maybe it exists in the future as a subcommittee going forward or something else, but just to make that point. On the mission, I do like calling things what they address and being clear about things. And I like, President Cunningham, your point that all of this is related to the mission. And so it shouldn't be a separate thing. So that's something I think to consider for the future. And
to consider a new name.
Consider calling that, what it's focused on, because we are all, hopefully, everything is in service to the mission. And then lastly, on the scheduling, I would favor maybe holding a date for a special focused meeting of the board, and we don't have to have it if there's no meeting, but instead of, and I can tell you there's an inordinate amount, having been in the position of leading an organization, there's so much work that goes into board meetings, just so much work. And you do have to spend time running your organization effectively. And you can't imagine all the people that's basically jobs get arrested because they want to, show and communicate that. I would favor maybe holding a date on the off month or a couple months for a special meeting so that we have the date on the calendar. If we don't need it, that's fine. But I dive into one meaty topic as opposed to, having everything go on. That would be just a suggestion that I would have.
Okay. And what do you think about the thought of adding committee meetings right now to whether it's March, April, or July in association with a retreat that I think people are very wedded to the July retreat, but the last couple of years, last year and this year, we're not doing a retreat in the formal sense of it, where we go off and delve into special topics. What do you think about, with those meetings, holding committee meetings in conjunction with those board meetings?
That certainly is an efficient way because we're all dedicated to be there anyway. I would just make sure that the work of those committees was needed at that time.
Executive Director Steves.
Madam Vice Chair and members of the committee, I wanted to note and kind of circle back to President Cunningham's note about there is opportunity to do more with the time we already have. And our office is, I think, eager to partner with her and her team to see if we can create some greater efficiencies and cover more territory in the time that we already have set aside. And so maybe with the committee's indulgence, we could work in these coming months with this new administration to see if there are some opportunities that we can mine out of this existing time, being sensitive to the fact that all of you are devoting huge amounts of volunteer hours to this work. And so we want to use your time really well. And I know there's room for improvement there. We've talked a little bit about it. There are places where we can tighten up, and there are places where we can have have deeper conversations and create all of that within the time we have. But we need to do a little bit of work on it, and we're eager to work on that.
Fair observation. Okay. Any other comments before we move on to our last topic?
I just want to say one quick thing. So when yesterday's presentations, they were talking to the board, but they were also talking to the world. And some of those presentations, that's the only time the world's going to hear about it, is when they're talking to us, kind of. And so, we had some really great presentations yesterday, and I want the world to know what we're doing. So I don't want to stop that, because that's how we communicate to the public. So.
Okay, yeah. Oh, President
If I may,
Cunningham.
Chair Mayron and Regents Hip, I think that's absolutely right. And again, I was really impressed and thankful to the team yesterday for the presentations. I think there's places where we can have those longer conversations, but I'm also looking across our team as I'm closely reviewing all of this work as it comes forward. Where are there places that perhaps you don't need 50 minutes of presentation, but we could perhaps try to be more succinct, get our key points across, and give you 20 minutes of information with 10 minutes of discussion or something. Sure. And so, I'm looking forward to working, and Brian's office has been really great in how we can set some of those pieces, and then perhaps we could fit in another topic or another component, and where you really need to hear more, and where we could provide more background on a topic if you want a deeper dive or have other background conversations on those.
True.
Okay, let's move on to the last topic, which is the comprehensive review of the board's code of conduct. Our presenters are Brian Steves and Jason Langworthy. So Executive Director Steves, if you want to start us off.
Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee, this is really the very first conversation in this comprehensive review discussion. And so today we are simply doing a very basic walkthrough. We understand we're pressed for time, so we will be efficient with this. But the board's code of conduct is required by the bylaws. It governs regent conduct. It's the one policy you adopt that is about how each of you behaves and acts on the board. And so it defines ethical standards, it lays out fiduciary duties, it sets expectations that you want to hold yourselves accountable to, and it also outlines some of the implementation procedures. And so with that, Mr. Langworthy is going to walk through the rest of it and tee up a couple of questions, and then we'll be ready to wrap up today.
Vice Chair Mayron, members of the committee. So we'll go through this quickly. You get an annual review each year, but I'll just make sure to highlight some of the areas of the policy as we walk through the policy framework. So we'll note in the guiding principles, which is section 2, the policy makes clear that regents shall adhere to the highest ethical standards and bring their varied backgrounds and expertise into their work, but set aside personal interests and at all times keep the welfare of the entire university paramount. In section 3, the fiduciary duties, which General Counsel Peterson often likes to highlight during that annual review, that regents are directed to act in good faith in accordance with the Constitution, laws of the land, the bylaws, and university policies, rules, and regulations, and using the duty of care, duty of loyalty, and duty of obedience. Section 4 includes a number of definitions, and this is an area which we'll talk about here in a minute, where potentially we would want to clarify some of the definitions and cross-references between sections that's included within the definition section. But there are definitions that define what a business associated with a region is, an employment-related conflict of interest, defining what would be considered family members, recusal, gifts, are all included there, which then help to be implemented within the sections after. Section 5 just requires you to fill out a financial disclosure in the same form consistent with those that are filled out by senior university officials. You are required to do that 30 days after election and then annually by March 31st thereafter. Those are received by the Office of the Board of Regents and then reviewed by the General Counsel. Then we move into Section 6, gifts, and this covers 2 primary areas of gifts. One, gifts to government officials, and this makes clear that the board is not to give gifts to government officials to curry favor, with the exception of trinkets, mementos, meals of reasonable value in which you're meeting with government officials, and tickets to university events. Those are exempt from that. Otherwise, any other gifts would be restricted. And then in subdivision 2, it defines that a regent shall not solicit a gift from any person or organization or accept a gift if it's given because of the regent's official status. And again, there are exemptions, a number which are listed within the policy. And the Board of Regents, the Office of the Board of Regents maintains guidelines for ticket courtesies, which you are all familiar with, to help you understand what you can request and how those tickets can be used to build relationships on behalf of the university. Moving into Section 7, expenses. It notes that regents serve without compensation, but that you can be reimbursed for any reasonable expenses in fulfilling your official duties. Section 8 then has a number of procedures and details specific to conflicts of interest and how the board handles conflicts of interest. And I will note that within that framework, first is to disclose those conflicts, to seek guidance from the General Counsel to help advise you when there is a potential conflict of interest. If for some reason there is a conflict where maybe the board chair is aware of it, the board chair can also ask the General Counsel for an opinion on a conflict of interest. But this is a process that's then used to allow for a regent to understand the guidance from the General Counsel in that area. If there are disputed conflicts of interest where there's an opinion that is issued by the General Counsel, the regent feels that is incorrect and disputes that conflict of interest, it would then go to a group of 3 regents to make a determination that is eventually voted on by the board, whether or not that regent should have to recuse on those items or if the regent does not have a conflict of interest. I'll note also within that section, There are provisions around university employment that only the regent who is elected to hold the seat designated for a student may be an employee, a compensated employee of the university. University enrollment, either by a regent or a regent's family member, is not considered a conflict of interest when you're voting, say, on the budget. And then elected or appointed public office. This section covers if a regent were to file for a federal, state, or local government office, to consult with the general counsel to see if there is a potential conflict of interest for running from that office, or if elected, if holding that office would create a conflict of interest between the two offices. Finally, section 9 has communication outside of meetings, and this is an area that we've heard some questions from the retreat on. So this has to do with who gets to speak for the board. It defines that the president is the primary spokesperson for the university, that the board chair, or in absence of the board chair, the board vice chairs can speak, are the only ones authorized to speak on behalf of the board as a whole, and that regents have the right to share their individual views on university matters, but as fiduciaries, they should understand that the timing, the content of those remarks, the substance of those words could reflect on the university and have potential legal or other consequences. And so should certainly clarify when a regent is speaking that they are speaking for themselves as individuals and not for the board, unless they have been authorized by board leadership to speak on behalf of the board. In section 10, information requests, this just outlines that regents are encouraged to be fully informed about the university. Specific requests for information should be routed through the Office of the Board of Regents so that OBR can help to facilitate that with the administration so that we can make sure that you are getting timely responses to those informations. It also allows that if, let's say that there are a number of requests or very complicated requests, that the president can seek guidance from board leadership about how to prioritize in the scope of any request made by a regent. If it's, say, a significant request that would take many, many hours to fulfill, how the president should work that request through the administration. Finally, violations and breaches in section 11 defines a process if there were to be a violation that the board would meet in a special meeting after this section was initiated by request of 7 regents. And then during that special meeting, the charges would be heard and the board would vote on whether or not there is a breach of the policy. And then the annual review, which you get each year from General Counsel Peterson. So I noted these throughout. So, we know working with General Counsel Peterson, a desire to clarify some definitions and cross-references. I noted the communication outside of meetings. So at the retreat, we heard, should there be additional guidance for the use of board letterhead by regents and letters of recommendation from regents for individuals when those are within the university, when you're making, say, a recommendation for someone gaining admission or another, an award or other aspect in which a letter of recommendation within the university. And if you send that as a regent, if there should be guidance on that or not. And then if there's a need for any additional guidance on speaking to the media or other forums. And certainly, since this is a comprehensive review that happens every 6 years, the entire policy is open. And so if there are other areas of the policy that the committee has feedback on that, as you've lived with the policy, you think should be adjusted, we would be happy to take that input either today or offline in the interest of time as we start to move through this comprehensive review. Any feedback that you have, we would then bring forward in terms of marked up language at a future meeting. Thank you, Vice Chair Mayron.
And the code of conduct is under our work plan, is going to be taken up in substance at I'm trying to remember which meeting.
Vice Chair Mayron, currently it's tentatively scheduled for October, but if we need more time, we could have a second conversation and then bring policy amendments at a subsequent meeting.
Okay, all right. Any comments at this time regarding what we'll be looking at as we do the comprehensive review of the code of conduct? Any areas that you think should be teed up or we ought to be focusing on in addition to the potential areas that are listed on the slide? All right. Then, Regent Hipsch.
So, you want us to comment on these?
No, not on the substance of it. Just are there other areas that you would like to see addressed?
Okay.
Okay. Any others? Okay. Just, I know it'll get picked up in when we talk about communications outside of the meetings. I think we need to take personally a very broad view of that, and which will, I'm sure, include these, but I know we have differing views on that in terms of speaking about university business in our personal capacity and how that relates to our fiduciary duties and the impact on the university. So when we get to that discussion about Article 9, just so that my hope is it'll be a broad discussion about how we do this, apart from when we're in a meeting where we're speaking to each other and to the public as a group. All right. Thank you, everyone. As there's no additional business before the committee, we stand adjourned.